KLBJ.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Local Licks on the Rock of Austin, 93.7 KLBJ. I'm Loris Lowe. Every Tuesday night, we give you 90 minutes of music from Austin artists exclusively. And tonight, got a little something different planned for you. We have Austin musician and author Kevin Dodds in the studio with us, who's just written a book called Edward Van Halen, The Definitive Biography, which is why I'm playing Eruption really loud in the background. Let's listen for a second, eh? Best guitar solo ever written, in my opinion. I mean, and you know
amazing.
You know every note of it, don't you, Kevin?
I do, actually. It's kind of I don't know if you had a kid growing up playing piano, and he had a Bach piece or a Beethoven piece or something that he mastered, he would play it for the rest of his life, and that's the way I am with that, and to be honest, there's probably not a week that goes by that I don't play it. I just it only takes 2 minutes to play. You know, and so I just do it as an exercise.
That's awesome. Now, when we first met, you were in a local band called Steamroller.
That's right. And technically, I kind of still am.
That's right. You guys do the reunion shows occasionally. Is there one coming up sometime in 2012?
Yes, actually, we are already on deck for the Steamboat reunion at Threadgills.
Oh, cool. That's usually in May or June?
It's in May or June, yeah. So
cool. Let's talk about your book.
All right.
You're a published author. How cool is that?
Who'd have thunk it?
Is this your only book or your first? Or
it's my first. Whether it will be my only remains to be seen.
Right. Right.
I finished it. I did it, and it's out there. So I guess I'd be kind of dumb not to toss around the idea of doing another one. But I don't have any current plan, but I'm tossing around a few ideas. We'll see.
Cool. The title of the book is Edward Van Halen, A Definitive Biography, and Kevin brought a couple of copies that we will give away in the next 30 minutes or so. You make no secret in the book about how big of a fan you are of Edward Van Halen.
It may seem kind of silly, but he's my baseball, football, music, all those heroes all put into one. When I was a kid, my first hero was Roger Staubach. And I'm sure a lot of dudes out there are going, yeah,
yep.
Roger Staubach was my first hero. But right about the time his career ended, I started listening to Van Halen on a very regular basis. In fact, I started listening to Van Halen in '79 when I was only 7 years old. My grandmother used to buy us, me and my brother, every 45 in the top 40, because they were only like 50 cents back then, 25 cents,
right?
And so she'd buy all 40 of them, and wouldn't put her out more than 20 or 30 bucks, whatever. And Dance the Night Away was in the charts in April of 1979 for my birthday when I was 7 years old, and that's when I got my first Van Halen record.
Turned on to by Grandma.
I know, and
awesome.
I even say something in the book. I thank we called her Mama Dodds.
Yeah.
And she actually bought me my first Van Halen record.
And the rest, as they say, is history.
Yep.
And speaking of history, I worked rock radio for many years. I know about Van Halen, then Van Hagar and all the back and forth with David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar reunions and just all the drama that went on.
Sure.
But I really found out a lot of information that I was not aware about Eddie Van Halen. I mean, I knew they were born in Holland and moved over when they were small kids, but I'd never thought about what they went through trying to assimilate into, American society. They didn't speak the language. They learned to, but they had an accent, so they were kind of picked on when they were little kids, Eddie and Alex.
Yeah, Edward said that they were actually treated like minorities, and that in one interview he said that before he could speak English, that he and Alex would be put literally in like a fenced-in area on the playground. This is pre desegregation and stuff too as well.
Wow.
Or right around the time of desegregation, and it was still rolling its way around very slowly.
Right.
But they had like a special chain link area of the playground that the minorities went to play to stay separate from the white kids. And Eddie and Alex were dumped into that because they were foreigners. They were from Holland, and they spoke Dutch. They didn't speak English.
Right.
They slowly learned to speak English, and they would get beat up and stuff because of it. And Eddie was kind of fortunate that his older brother Alex was a little bigger than he is and was, and they were fortunate to have kind of that brotherly bond that where the older brother really looks out for the younger brother instead of constantly picking on him or not wanting to be around him or anything like that. So.
Right. And their dad was a musician, a very talented musician, it sounds like.
Yeah, he was great. And that's what Eddie and Alex said, is that music was around them from the day they were born, which is very much like Wolfgang, Edward's son, who is now the bass player for the band. He just was born into a world of constant music, so he just took straight to it. So it's very much the same, except the music was a little different. Eddie's dad played clarinet and jazz and stuff like that, but the boys, when they got older, started playing with him in those jazz bands and oompa bands and stuff like that.
I was trying to picture Edward Van Halen and Alex Van Halen wearing lederhosen.
Yep, that's exactly what they did. There are some pictures of Alex playing with his dad, and he's like he had to wear like a tuxedo and stuff. They used to play at country clubs and stuff like that. But that's wild though if you think about it. That their dad, I think Alex was 12 or something when he played like his first gig. Yeah. Played the drums, with his dad, and I think Ed was, 10 or 11 when he first started playing the bass, for his dad's band. So yeah, that's really cool. And then they later on, David Lee Roth actually had the idea to repay their father a favor and asked him to play on Diver Down on the song Big Bad Bill Is Sweet William Now, or Jan Van Halen actually plays the clarinet throughout that whole song.
Yeah, I actually got that out and listened to it today because I hadn't listened to it in 15, 20 years.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
It is. It's great stuff. It's great stuff. And speaking of David Lee Roth, he was first rejected when he tried out to be their lead singer. I mean, this is when they were teenagers still, I guess. Yeah,
they were teenagers. Yeah, he had a lot of guts. They were all rivals in different bands. Michael Anthony was in one band, and David Lee Roth was in another, and Eddie and Alex were in another. And they crossed paths on that backyard party circuit scene a lot. He saw Ed and was like, "Whoa, man, I'd like to get in on that," But he even called Ed like a mentor of his. He said what he did with his hands, he said, I wanted to do with my voice and my feet. Yeah. And so he got the guts up and went down, knocked on their door, and said, "I want to be your singer." And they said, "Okay, learn this Cream song, or whatever, and Crossroads, and come back next week and we'll play, And when Dave came back, he sang it like David Lee Roth. He didn't sing it like Jack Bruce. Right. And Edward's thing was that he always played. If he played Clapton, if you closed your eyes, you wouldn't know if it was Eddie Van Halen or Eric Clapton.
Yeah.
But Dave is always like Dave, and so he they were like, nah, they were expecting someone that did it note perfect. Yeah. But of course, even Eddie said, well, obviously we turned around on the idea because later on they got him in the band. So yeah, but his first try was a no-go.
But I thought it was cool that David Lee Roth was the one who came up with the idea to name the band Van Halen. Yeah, I'd never heard that before.
Yeah, and his reasoning was excellent. They had all had these silly names. Michael Anthony's band's name was Snake. And Dave's band's name was the Red Ball Jets, and Van Halen was going by Mammoth. Just all these names that we're laughing about now because we would never be repeating them. What is it, 30 years later? 35 years later. Right. But the truth is that they went under Mammoth for a long time, and then they found out it was copyrighted. So then they changed it to Genesis.
That's right.
And then it was like just
they found out pretty quickly.
A month later, somebody was like, "Guys, there's a band in England already called Genesis." And so Dave was finally like, "You know what? Let's just call it Van Halen." Actually, his thinking was that it would be like Santana, which was also he was huge at that time. So he was like, last name, that's kind of the way to go. And he said, plus it's a cool sounding name. and you know, it could be a classical musician, you know, or whatever. It's a name that never gets old. You know, it's just, it's not like some clever band name that, you know, you hear by the third time and it's not clever anymore.
Yeah,
it's just their last name.
Or something.
Yeah. And then, you know, the guys were hesitant. You know, Eddie and Alex were like, they weren't sure, because Eddie, you know, was a pretty shy guy for the most part, and wasn't sure he wanted to be that kind of braggadocious, I guess, about his last name or whatever.
Yeah.
But they agreed. And, you know, I think it was bigger than just Eddie and Alex. I think it also involved their father, too, because Dave was such a huge admirer of their father. You know, Dave's dad was a doctor.
Yeah.
And, you know, when he got to go over in Eddie Alex's house, their dad was a musician, you know, so it was very different, you know. And so I think it was the whole family thing. I think it was beyond Eddie, it was beyond Alex, and it kind of extended to, you know, their father and just the whole, that idea, you know, of the family of music. Right. But the funny thing is, of course, by about 1980, 81, when someone said Van Halen, the very first thing that came to their mind was David Lee Roth.
That's so true. Yeah.
I mean, you would see the cover of the magazine. It'd be David Lee Roth on the cover of the magazine. Yeah. And it would say Van Halen. You know, a life of excess or whatever. Yeah, like I mean, he essentially was a Van Halen. You know, I mean, there were definitely times that before Eddie really did beat it, you know, and kind of did something outside of the band. You know, Dave was by far the leader of that band, you know, without question. Well,
people at clubs used to call him Van, thinking that it was his name.
You're exactly right.
Mr. Van, last name Halen.
Yeah, they used to literally thought that David Lee Roth's name was Van Halen. The Bill Gazzari at Gazzari's Teen Club that they played at like 200 times a year or something back in the 70s would always go up to Dave and say, "Oh, here's an extra 20, Van. You guys did great tonight." It's too funny.
Didn't refuse that. In case you're just tuning in, I'm talking to a local guitarist, Kevin Dodds, who is also an author. He's just published his first book, Edward Van Halen, A Definitive Biography. Let's give one of those away. If you'd like to have this book for free, call 973-8300. We'll just take the third caller right now and give you a copy of this Edward Van Halen biography.